The Witcher 3. It's finally here. I could not be more excited about this game. I mentioned in one of my other videos that I and my wife actually pre-ordered the game from our local store for two different platforms. This was so we could game at our separate paces. I will eventually show you some PlayStation footage in the future, or in some other video, but this one will focus on the PC platform. I normally download games, and it's very rare that I get physical copies, but I'm glad that I basically did for this game. I did get some neat pre-order items like a poster and codes for the first two Witcher games, so it's great, mainly because I don't really remember finishing the second game, and I'm not sure whether I actually finished the first game. So anyway, even without those small pre-order bonuses, the standard edition, once you get it, is actually impressive by itself. You can see the passion and effort that CDPR put into just the physical copies. They included a number of pretty nice stuff. You get a pair of stickers, a compendium for the game, a manual, the game soundtrack, and even a well-done map of the Northern Realms. So, holding it in my hands when I was, unboxing it and just taking out the CDs, it felt like going back in time, back in the old days when the packaging and contents really mattered. Again, this is just for the standard version. So, included in that version is that you also get a GOG code that is not really needed to play the game. So, what's important here is that you have to remember that The Witcher 3 is a DRM-free game, which does not require any of those annoying online checks while you're gaming. Also, it will not push DLC content in your face for you to purchase. If you do decide to redeem the GOG code, that's when you basically start to see the DLCs pop up, but not to worry, they're all free. Now, there are also other additions like being able to get a backup copy of the game, but there's nothing behind it with, there's no catch to it. So basically, right from the start, CDPR is already doing things right by their game. One other thing is that they also lifted the NDAs and embargoes for those reviewers who got early copies. I think so they lifted the NDAs I think about a week before release. So this is for basically consumers having the option to check out some opinions and some reviews before making any purchasing decisions. So it's pretty great that they decided to do this one. But of course, we have to ask the question, especially if you are new to the series, what is The Witcher? So it's a very big game actually, and there's a lot even for a first impressions video. So let's cut this up into specific parts. So what's a Witcher anyway? To keep it short, Witchers are enhanced humans who by profession are monster slayers for hire. Now the most prominent of them, and for this game, is Geralt. I remember him being called the White Wolf many times over in the first Witcher game. He's regarded as a legend and one of the best even among his kind. The general opinion of people in the world about Witchers is sort of a mixed bag to being more of fear and fear. I won't spoil the intro videos as to why they're viewed as such, but basically being mutants and having magic-like abilities makes them different from the ordinary human. It also doesn't help that Geralt, the main character for this game, is sort of the brooding type with an anti-hero image. Now the game world, as in previous ones, revolves around Geralt and the stuff happening around him. It basically ranges from lost memory plot lines to confusing romances, bloodshed involving monsters and humans, and political intrigue. Now, the theme is very adult in nature. If you played at least the intro or the introduction for the second game like me, then you'll get to see something similar in this final installment as you start the game. It basically doesn't shy away from, basically some sex sequences and violent themes or throwing a few F words and other cusses. Now, the backdrop is also paired with this massive world that you can basically explore. The area you can travel has expanded much from the first game and has not basically disappointed so far. There are places you can visit that might seem devoid of life, but you either have to watch your surroundings for some monster to just basically pop up, or you might find some interesting treasure that you might find useful. Now, in terms of scale, I can't really compare it to Skyrim as I haven't played it. In fact, the last ES game I played was Morrowind. But I can make basically a comparison to Dragon Age 3, and from what I've seen, The Witcher's world is bigger and feels more alive. As with any other RPG, it does have a central theme or an idea that, generally drives you forward to do something within the game. Now, to be clear, and just from the time I've spent with it so far, the main story isn't the world-saving theme that you would normally expect, but it is something very grounded. The story basically revolves around two things, on what you do best, which is killing monsters and finding specific people that you really care about. Now, still, the game isn't really limited to that. You'll find that as you progress in the game that there are many different stories and scenarios that you can choose to get involved in. Most of the time, the things you do in game will affect the overall world or touch upon the main story in one way or the other. Now, of course, as with most RPGs, if you do eventually progress the story, you'll eventually encounter combat. Now, in the Witcher world, this revolves around three major things. First thing is swordplay, second one is alchemy, and the third one is science. So I'll probably do a video just to detail more, give more details on those three things. But here's the gist. Swordplay basically means knowing when to use your steel and silver swords and being mobile enough to avoid enemy attacks. So just remember to gut people with your steel sword and dice up monsters with your silver sword. Now, alchemy involves creating specific potions that help enhance your abilities and even make you some bombs. The signs are various limited magical abilities that help you take down enemies and will also have uses outside of combat. For example, the famous Igni sign helps you take on monsters with weaknesses to fire, and examples of those monsters are drowners. Now, it's normal to want to take down enemies by slashing away, just hacking and slashing away, but alchemy and science should not be ignored. So when I vaguely remember it, but when I played the first Witcher game, I ignored a huge part of alchemy, or the other, the science rather, in the first Witcher game, and it really made combat difficult. Now, one thing about combat in this final installment is that although it has improved compared to Witcher 1 and, from what the small amount I've seen in Witcher 2, it does feel still, a bit of it still feels a bit clunky, but yes, it is an improvement over its previous incarnations. So how do you progress your character here in The Witcher? So it's very typical. It follows a very typical format. As with most RPGs, you have levels and ability points. Now, you have a bunch of weapons and armor you can also use, and some of them you can even craft. I like the fact that armor variations in this game are much better, specifically when you compare it to the very first game. The point system is not just based on levels, as with some other RPGs, ability points can also be earned everywhere else. This very much encourages exploration, as sometimes some sources of power like shrines can be found in the world, and you can just basically just click on that and earn the ability point. Of course, sometimes there will be the occasional monster that you have to take down to get that point. The mutagen system will also in different ways buff your different abilities. There's really not much to say in this aspect, but rest assured the ability and leveling system, or the character progression system in The Witcher, is very deep and rewarding from what I've seen so far. I guess one more thing that needs to be answered here is whether the game is actually immersive, and whether being a newcomer to the genre or the series will affect you negatively. Well, immersion-wise, it's something that CDPR has really done well. You are so involved in your choices, and sometimes you are left to wonder whether you've actually made the right ones minutes ago, or even maybe an hour or two ago. If you like being the good guy in RPGs, it may not always be the best way to handle situations. It's a very morally ambiguous world, with Geralt being nearly the same. If you want to think of it in terms of alignments in the Dungeons and Dragons system, I'd say he was more of a chaotic, neutral kind of guy. You can't tell how he should be handling given certain situations and scenarios. The In terms of immersion, the graphics and the music are quite amazing. It really pulls you into the world. For the music, you can still hear the undertones of the music in the first two games, but since then has evolved for the final installment. It's great that they decided to include the original soundtrack even just in the standard package. Now for the visuals, I'm using a GTX 970 paired with a standard i5, and while I'm unable to push Ultra, it's still amazing to look at. The foliage, the scenery, the textures, they all really look good. Still though, when I look at the game world and the scenery, the background, the characters, the way they're modeled, I do feel that sometimes the game could have been made to look better. I vaguely remember the older gameplay videos and screenshots that were provided some years back, but I thought that it did look better, and I guess this is why there are some discussions on, CDPR pulling a Watch Dogs on us for this one. Of course, they denied it, and they claimed that it was based on, for optimization's sake, if there were any changes. But even with that, I do feel that at least for the PC version, although I'm again unable to push Ultra, I just feel that the game should look better. Now, in terms of the other thing I mentioned about whether you would be negatively, affected or impacted if you haven't played the first two games, the introduction sequence in the game helps you to sort of catch up, and there's even a sequence in the game that allows you to sort of answer questions on what you actually, supposedly did in the past two games. So it's a pretty common thing that's happening now in most RPGs, especially for those that, I guess they're trying to help out those who come in late into a series. If it's a 3-part series, you're coming into part 2 or part 3. So it's basically, it's just like other RPGs. You won't have trouble in basically catching up. And that's pretty much it for this first impressions video. And I'm guessing you can, sort of it's just out there that I do find this game to be quite impressive. The way it was packaged, the way it was just the way so much effort was obviously put into this game. I'm really impressed with CDPR, and it's really to our benefit that they're doing this much effort into making their games the very best for us gamers and users or consumers. While I did mention some things like the graphics and the combat that needed improvement, everything else I've mentioned so far, and I'm sure, I've only been into the game for a few hours. I'm sure that many other things will outweigh any of the other negatives that I have mentioned or might eventually find out in the game. Now, I'm just hoping that the end game, or at least the way they were saying that there were more than 30 different endings for this game, and I'm hoping it's not going to turn out like that one space game that we all were a bit disappointed with. So I'll be making more Witcher videos, so watch out for those, and as always, thanks for watching.